Good afternoon. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Today I'll be reading from the book The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I am currently in chapter 9, Confront Your Dark Side, The Law of Repression. Part 2, Keys to Human Nature. If we think about the people we know and see on a regular basis, we would have to agree that they are usually quite pleasant and agreeable. For the most part, they seem pleased to be in our company, are relatively upfront and confident, socially responsible, able to work with a team, take good care of themselves, and treat others well. But every now and then, with these friends, acquaintances, and colleagues, we glimpse behavior that seems to contradict what we normally see. This can come in several forms. Out of nowhere, they make a critical, even cruel comment about us, or express a rather harsh assessment of our work or personality. Is this what they really feel and we're struggling to conceal? For a moment, they are not so nice, or we hear of their unpleasant treatment of family or employees behind closed doors. Or out of the blue, they have an affair with the most unlikely man or woman and it leads to bad things. Or they put their money in some absurd and risky financial scheme. Or they do something rash that puts their career in jeopardy. Or we catch them in some lie or manipulative act. We can also notice such moments of acting out or behaving against reputation in public figures and celebrities who then go through lengthy apologies for the strange moods that came over them. What we glimpse in these moments is the dark side of their character, what the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow consists of all the qualities people try to deny about themselves and repress. This repression is so deep and effective that people are generally unaware of their shadow. It operates unconsciously, according to Jung. This shadow has a thickness to it, depending on how deep the level of repression and the number of traits that are being concealed. Nixon would be said to have a particularly thick shadow. When we experience those moments, when people reveal the dark side, we can see something come over their face, their voice, and body language is altered, almost as if another person is confronting us. The features of the upset child suddenly becoming visible. We feel their shadow as it stirs and emerges. The shadow lies buried deep within, but it becomes disturbed and active in moments of stress or when deep wounds and insecurities are triggered. It also tends to merge more as people get older. When we are young, everything seems exciting to us, including the various social roles we must play. But later in life, we tire of the mask we have been wearing, and the leakage is greater. Because we rarely see the shadow, the people we deal with are somewhat strangers to us. It is as if we only see a two-dimensional flattening image of people, their pleasant social side. Knowing the contours of their shadows makes them come to life in 3 dimensions. This ability to see the rounded person is a critical step in our knowledge of human nature. Armed with this knowledge, we can anticipate people's behavior in moments of stress, understand their hidden motives, and not get dragged under by any self-destructive tendencies. The shadow is created in our earliest years and stems from 2 conflicting forces that we felt. First, we came into the world bursting with energy and intensity. We did not understand the difference between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. We only experienced natural impulses. Some of these impulses were aggressive. We wanted to monopolize our parents' attention and receive much more of it than our siblings. We experienced moments of great affection, but also powerful dislikes and hatreds. Even our parents for not meeting our needs. We wanted to feel superior in some way and appreciated for it in apparent strength or smartness. We could be remarkably selfish if we were denied what we wanted and turned devious and manipulative to get it. We could even find some pleasure in hurting people or fantasize about getting revenge. We experienced and expressed the full gamut of emotions. We were not the innocent angels people imagine children to be. At the same time, we were completely vulnerable and dependent on our parents for survival. This dependence lasted for many years. We watched our parents with eagle eyes, noting every signal of approval and disapproval on their faces. They would chastise us for having too much energy and wish we could sit still. They sometimes found us too willful and selfish. They felt that other people were judging them by the behavior of their children, so they wanted us to be nice, to put on a show for others, to act like the sweet angel. They urged us to be cooperative and play fairly, even though at times we wished to behave differently. They encouraged us to tone down our needs, to be more of what they needed in their stressful lives. They actively discouraged our tantrums and any form of acting out. As we got older, the pressures to present a particular front came from other directions, peers and teachers. It was fine to show some ambition, but not too much of it, or we might seem antisocial. That's wow. That explains me perfect. We could exude confidence, but not too much, or we would seem to be asserting our superiority. The need to fit into the group became a primary motivation, and so we learned to tamp down and restrain the dark side of our personality. Interesting. We internalize all of the ideas of our culture, being nice, having pro social values. Much of this is essential for the smooth functioning of social life, but in the process, a large part of our nature moved underground, into the shadow. Of course, there are some who never learn to control these darker impulses and end up acting them out in real life. The criminal in our midst. But even criminals struggle to appear nice a great deal of the time and justify their behavior. Most of us succeed in becoming a positive social animal, but at a price. We end up missing the intensity that we experienced in childhood, the full gamut of emotions, and even the creativity that came with the wilder energy. We secretly yearn to recapture it in some way. We are drawn toward what is outwardly forbidden, sexually or socially. We may resort to alcohol or drugs or any stimulant because we feel our senses dull, our minds too restrained by convention. I'm feeling that right now. If we accumulate a lot of hurts and resentments along the way, which we strive to conceal from others, the shadow grows thicker. If we experience success in our lives, we become addicted to positive attention. And in the inevitable down moments when the drug of such attention wears off, the shadow will be disturbed and activated. Concealing this dark side requires energy. It can be draining to always present such a nice, confident front. And so the shadow wants to release some of the inner tension and come back to life. As the poet Horace once said, Naturam expellis feraca tamen usque recurrit. You can throw out nature with a pitchfork, but she'll always come back. You must become adept at recognizing such moments of release in others and interpreting them. Seeing the outlines of the shadow that now come forward. The following are some of the most notable signs of such release. Contradictory behavior. This is the most eloquent sign of all. It consists of actions that belie the carefully constructed front that people present. For instance, a person who preaches morals is suddenly caught out in a very compromising situation, or someone with a tough exterior reveals insecurities and hysteria at the wrong moment, or a person who preaches free love and open behavior suddenly becomes quite domineering and authoritarian. The strange contradictory behavior is a direct expression of the shadow. For more on such signs and how to interpret them, see the section on page 248. Emotional outbursts. A person suddenly loses his or her habitual self-control and sharply expresses deep resentments or says something biting and hurtful. In the aftermath of such a release, they may blame it on stress. They may say they did not mean any of it, when in fact the opposite is the case. The shadow has spoken. Take what they said at face value. On a less intense level, people may suddenly become unusually sensitive and touchy. Some of their deepest fears and insecurities from childhood have somewhat become activated, and this makes them hyper alert to any possible slight and ripe for smaller outbursts. Vehement denial. According to Freud, the only way that something unpleasant or uncomfortable in our unconscious can reach the conscious mind is through active denial. We express the very opposite of what is buried within. This could be a person fulminating against homosexuality, when in fact he or she feels the opposite. Nixon engaged in such denials frequently, as when he told others, in the strongest terms, that he never cried or held grudges or gave into weakness or cared what people thought of him. You must reinterpret the denials as positive expressions of shadow desires. Accidental behavior. People might talk of quitting some addiction or not working so damn hard or staying away from a self-destructive relationship. They then fall into the behavior they spoke of trying to avoid, blaming it on an uncontrollable illness or dependency. This slaves their conscience for indulging their dark side. They simply can't help it. Ignore the justifications and see the shadow operating and releasing. Also remember that when people are drunk and behave differently, often it is not the alcohol that is speaking, but the shadow. Over idealization. This can serve as one of the most potent covers for the shadow. Let us say we believe in some cause, such as the importance of transparency in our actions, particularly in politics, or we admire and follow the leader of just such a cause, or we decide that some new type of financial investment, mortgage-backed securities, for instance, represents the latest and most sophisticated path to wealth. In these situations, we go much further than simple enthusiasm. We are charged with powerful conviction. We gloss over faults, inconsistencies, and possible downsides. We see everything in black and white terms. Our cause is moral, modern, and progressive. The other side, including doubters, is evil and reactionary. We now feel sanctioned to do everything for the cause: lie, cheat, manipulate, spy, falsify scientific data, get revenge. Anything the leader does is justified. In the case of the investment, we just justified in taking what normally would be seen as great risk, because this time the financial tool is different and new, not subject to the unusual rules. We can be as greedy as we like without worrying about the consequences. We tend to be dazzled by the strength of people's convictions and interpret excessive behavior as simply overzealousness, but we should look at it in another light. By over idealizing a cause, person, or object, people can give free rein to the shadow. That is that is their unconscious motivation, the bullying, the manipulations, the greed that comes out for the sake of the cause or product should be taken at face value. The overly strong conviction providing simple cover for repressed emotions to play themselves out. Related to this, in arguments, people will use their powerful convictions as a perfect way to disguise their desires to bully and intimidate. They trot out statistics and anecdotes which can always be found to buttress their case, then proceed to insult or impugn our integrity. It's just an exchange of ideas, they say. Pay attention to the bullying tone and do not be fooled. Intellectuals might be subtler. They will lord it over us with obscure language and ideas we cannot decode, and we are made to feel inferior for our ignorance. In all cases, see this as repressed aggression finding a way to leak out. Projection. This is by far the most common way of dealing with our shadow, because it offers almost daily release. We cannot admit to ourselves certain desires for sex, for money, for power, for superiority in some area. And so instead, we project those desires onto others. Sometimes we simply imagine and completely project these qualities out of nothing in order to judge and condemn people. Other times we find people who express such taboo desires in some form, and we exaggerate them in order to justify our dislike or hatred. For instance, we accuse another person in some conflict or of having authoritarian desires. In fact, they are simply defending themselves. We are the ones who secretly wish to dominate. But if we see it in the other side first, we can vent our repressed desire in the form of a judgment and justify our own uh, auth- author- authoritarian authoritarian response. Let us say we repress early on assertive and spontaneous impulses so natural to the child. Unconsciously, we wish to have back such qualities, but we cannot overcome our internal taboos. We look out for those who are less inhibited, more assertive, and open with their ambitions. We exaggerate these tendencies. Now we can despise them, and in thinking about them, give vent to what we cannot admit to ourselves or about ourselves. The great 19th century German composer Richard Wagner frequently expressed anti-Semitic sentiments. He blamed Jews for ruining Western music for their eclectic tastes, sentimentality, and emphasis on technical brilliance. He yearned for more pure German music, which he would create. Most of what he blamed Jews for in music was completely made up. Yet Wagner, strangely enough, had many of the same qualities that he seemed to hate in Jews. His tastes were quite eclectic. He had sentimental tendencies. Many of the pianists and conductors he worked with were Jewish because of their technical proficiency. Remember, behind any vehement hatred is often a secret and very unpalatable envy of the hated person or people. It is only through such hate that it can be released from the unconscious in some form. Consider yourself a detective when it comes to piecing together people's shadows. Through the various signs you pick up, you can fill in the outlines of their repressed desires and impulses. This will allow you to anticipate future leakage and odd shadow-like behavior. Rest assured such behavior never occurs just once. and it will tend to pop up in different areas. If, for instance, you pick up bullying tendencies in the way someone argues, you will also see it in other activities. You might entertain the notion that this concept of the shadow is somewhat antiquated. After all, we live in a much more rational, scientifically oriented culture today. People are more transparent and self-aware than ever, we might say. We are less repressed than our ancestors who had to deal with all sorts of pressures from organized religion. The truth, however, might very well be the opposite. In many ways, we are more split than ever between our conscious, social selves and our unconscious shadow. We live in a culture that enforces powerful codes of correctness that we must abide by or face the shaming that is now so common on social media. We are supposed to live up to ideas of selflessness, which are impossible for us because we are not angels. All of this drives the dark side of our personalities even further underground. We can read signs of this in how deeply and secretly we are all drawn to the dark side in our culture. We thrill at watching shows in which various Machiavellian characters manipulate, deceive, and dominate. We lap up stories in the news of those who have been caught acting out in some way and enjoy the ensuing shaming. Serial killers and diabolical cult leaders enthrall us. With these shows and the news, we can always become moralistic and talk of how much we despise such villains. But the truth is that the culture constantly feeds us these figures because we are hungry for expression of the dark side. All of this provides a degree of release from the tension we experience in having to play angel and seem so correct. These are relatively harmless forms of release, but there are more dangerous ones, particularly in the realm of politics. We find ourselves increasingly drawn to leaders who give vent to this dark side, who express the hostility and resentment we all secretly feel. They say things we would dare not say in the safety of the group and rally to some cause. We have license to project and vent our spleen on various convenient scapegoats. By idealizing the leader and the cause, we are now free to act in ways we would normally shy away from as individuals. These demagogues are adept at exaggerating the threats we face, painting everything in black and white terms. They stir up the fears, insecurities, and desires for revenge that have gone underground but are waiting at any moment to explode in the group setting. We will find more and more such leaders as we experience greater degrees of repression and inner tension. The writer Robert Louis Stevenson expressed this dynamic in the novel The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, published in 1886. The main character, Dr. Jekyll, is a well-respected and wealthy doctor slash scientist with impeccable manners. So much like the paragons of goodness in our culture. He invents a concoction that transforms him into Mr. Hyde, the embodiment of his shadow, who proceeds to murder and rape and indulge in the wildest of sensual pleasures. Stevenson's idea is that the more civilized and moral we outwardly become, the more potentially dangerous is the shadow, which we so fiercely deny. As the character Dr. Jekyll describes it, my devil had long been caged. He came out roaring. The solution is not more repression and correctness. We can never alter human nature through enforced niceness. The pitchfork doesn't work, nor is the solution to seek release from our shadow in the group, which is volatile and dangerous. Instead, the answer is to see our shadow in action and become more self-aware. It is hard to project onto others our own secret impulses or to over-idealize some cause. Once we are made aware of the mechanisms operating within us, through such self-knowledge, we can find a way to integrate the dark side into our consciousness productively and creatively. For more on this, see the last section of this chapter. In doing so, we become more authentic and complete, exploiting to the maximum the energies we naturally possess. In conclusion, subscribe to the channel, comment any questions you have, like if the information was inspiring for you, and share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. My Instagram is Max_Bugatti_8008. I'm about family first. I'm a global stock investor. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. I have a masculine confidence buildings course, and currently I'm out here in Cali, Colombia. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.